Today we're in my office at Prospect Park Books, which is in Altadena, sort of a suburb of Pasadena, just about 2 blocks north of Pasadena. But this is our office. We've been here about 4 years, and there are 3 to 5 of us here on any given day working on producing books.
And what's the story of Prospect Park Books?
I come from, my background, I was a writer and editor working in books and magazines and all kinds of publishing related things. And 12 years ago, I decided to publish one book called Hometown Pasadena, which came out of living here and falling in love with the city, or being surprised how I fell in love with the city. And so I produced that one book. I wasn't really intending for all this to happen. I just did the one book, and it was it did a lot better than I thought it would. It was an unexpected success. So then I thought, well, I guess I'll do some more books. And then it just kept growing from there.
And what kind of books do you all publish here?
It's a mix. It's a very eclectic mix for a small press of regional nonfiction, mystery fiction, general fiction, cookbooks. We do cookbooks from Southern California authors, about one a year. Some humor and gift titles. So general trade publishing, but a pretty broad mix for a small press.
Compared to larger publishing companies, what makes Prospect Park unique?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is for a publisher is we can find the niches that the big New York publishing companies cannot do. We also can work very closely with our authors, and it's a very personal relationship, much more than a corporation would be. So I think you just saw a minute ago, we had an author drop by with some jam she was bringing for a promotion we're doing. So that's pretty special that we can have those kind of things. And also we can, in terms of what we publish, we'll take some risks on some niches that the big guys won't do. Because we know, and we also know California. So part of it is I've lived here my whole life. The New York publishing companies don't know my backyard the way I know my backyard. So that was part of the motivation too.
Are all of your books published about California?
No, not at all. They probably should be, but we have a very mixed. I've got an author in Ohio, an author in New York, an author in Canada. I've got one in Paris. So, but we try to focus. There's a lot of, the books might not be set here, but many of our authors live here. So we have a mix. Some are regional, but some are not.
The book, Hometown Pasadena, what's it about?
Hometown Pasadena is about everything about the city of Pasadena, which I think I told you I fell in love with it, and it was much richer than I had thought it would be when I first moved here 27 years ago. And it's about all aspects of it. It's very feature magazine oriented. We have a lot of essays from notable writers. We have a lot of good writers in this community. But it's the culture, the architecture. The city's is internationally famous for its architecture. So the architecture, the gardens, also famous for that. The culture, the literary scene, both past and present. The food. Pasadena allegedly has, we did the best we could to verify this, more nonprofits per capita than any city in the United States. It also has more restaurants per capita, believe it or not, than any city in the United States, including New York City. And for better or worse, it has more private schools per capita than any city in the country. So there's a very strong focus here on education, on culture, on the arts, and on beauty. I mean, the architecture and gardens. This is a community that is in love with beauty, I think.
And so what new things can people learn about Pasadena by opening up Hometown Pasadena?
Well, lots of fun facts and trivia. There's some fun essays on the reading side. For example, one of our authors, one of the contributors to the book, her grandmother was the real little old lady from Pasadena, the Jan and Dean song. Jan is her second cousin, and they wrote that song about her grandmother, who was in fact the terror of Colorado Boulevard. So she has a great story about that. It's a lot of fun to read, just because people who know the song from the 60s. I think there's a sense of discovery of the talented people who are here. We profile, we do first-person interviews with about 24 local notables, and everybody from an elementary school teacher to a now famous musician, and it just about what this town means to them. And I think and just the focus on culture, art, education, architecture, all that is deeper than I think many people realize.
And why do you think it's important for local Pasadenians to know that about themselves?
Well, I think they already know it. I think my little joke has been ever since I did the first edition of Hometown Pasadena that Pasadena is in love with itself. And I think people actually thinking that it's the best kept secret. I also published a novel called Helen of Pasadena by Leon Dolan. That's actually our best-selling book of all time. And she just perfectly celebrated and skewered the Pasadena thing, which is, my family's been here for generations. We do things a certain way. We are happy down in our little land here. Going over to Los Angeles is such a bother. So anyway, I think there is a strong sense of culture here, of community, of the people feel like they belong here. Newcomers take a little time. That's the other issue and that Leon makes fun of in her novel, Helen of Pasadena, is that she arrived here as a newcomer and felt like, wait a minute, I haven't been here 4 generations. Will these people, and I didn't go to kindergarten with all these people, so will I fit in? And it took a long time. It can take a long time. Other parts of LA are famous for being much more transient, but not so much Pasadena. People tend to, when they come here, they usually stay here.
And so are there any favorite examples of yours of the work that's in Hometown Pasadena?
So favorite examples from Hometown Pasadena, I don't like to pick out favorites, but for this edition of the book, which is completely different from the first one 12 years ago, we had some fun got an illustrator, and we did a list thing called Perfectly Pasadenan, and it's what kind of spoofs the archetypes here. The Valley Hunters are the people who belong to the Valley Hunt Club, which is the club that founded the Rose Parade in the 1800s. Very old school. There's the Hollywood East. There are a lot of people who work in television, film here, entertainment industry, but they're the people who want to live over here and not be showy and flashy like those West Siders. And so we had a lot of fun. It's the neighborhood they live in, the car they drive, the kind of dog they have, where they get their coffee, that kind of thing. And we have, the We Got Here Firsties, and the Millennial Move, the Brainiacs, which is the JPL and Caltech crowd. So that was fun to do. The Do-Gooders, this community is a very, very strong commitment to charitable work, to philanthropy. And there's a lot of that here. A lot of churches, a lot of nonprofits. And art, there's also a very strong art community. So I would say that is one thing that was new and fun about it. And also, I think because we're talking about literary Pasadena, I think we have a section in here that I'm proud of about the literary history here that goes back, a long time. And it has our bookstores. We have extraordinary bookstores. We've had many writers who came out of here from 100 years ago. We added, in this case, we had a wonderful writer, Linnell George, do a piece on Octavia Butler. Mm-hmm. She's one of the Octavia Butler scholars at the Huntington Library. So she wrote something about that for us. We have a great collection of excerpts of writing about Pasadena and tributes to our libraries and bookstores that we have, I think really world-class in that. Well, certainly Huntington Library is as world-class as it gets.
You're also involved in something called LitFest Pasadena. What is LitFest Pasadena? So
LitFest Pasadena is a literary festival that started maybe about 6 years ago. I don't remember exactly. And it is a weekend celebration of literary culture. It's here in Pasadena, but the content is not limited to Pasadena. It's just here because this is a wonderful place for that. And it is a weekend in spring and May. I am on the planning committee for that. As a matter of fact, we're having a meeting here at the office tonight. And it's over in the Playhouse District and centered around Vroman's and the Pasadena Playhouse and held in various venues in that area. And it's a 2-day celebration of literary culture mostly in the Los Angeles area, but set in Pasadena. And it's every kind of book and author, from children's books to sci-fi to literary fiction, poets. There are poetry slams. There's a panel on publishing. There's children's book performances. There's all kinds of things. It's a lot of fun. Every year is different, and it's been getting better every year. So this year we're going to have a great lineup. So it just is a 2-day celebration of the book here in Pasadena.
And what's the mission or goal of LitFest?
The mission is to, it's under the aegis of Lightbringer Project, which is a wonderful nonprofit here in Pasadena that is focused on education and the arts. And they also sponsor the Doodah Parade, which is our other famous parade, very fun. And it's really to boost the community of the book and literacy here. And there's a big emphasis in LitFest as well on young people and on teenagers and getting kids from the local schools to come take part in readings. And so it's to boost literacy, celebrate the book, get people to read and write. And also there's usually part of it is our writers' workshops, encouraging writers.
Why is it? It seems like there's a lot going on in Pasadena in terms of its literary community. Why is that so important to you?
Oh well, the literary community here is essential to me, and I wouldn't have stayed here have an office here if it wasn't that it was such a strong place for that. I mean, that books have been I've been a big reader my whole life as a child, and it's valued here. It's special. We've been welcomed in the community, and I feel like we're really part of the community. There are other publishers here too, and so we all stick together and help each other out. There's a lot of good writers here, so it just makes for an intelligent, thoughtful, well-read place to be.
And finally, why do you think it's so important to have such a strong, supportive literary community?
Well, having a strong literary community, it's the backbone. I mean, we couldn't be in business if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for the people valuing books. And certainly for a small press to survive, it takes community support. So having a literary community for our business is essential. For myself and for living here, it just makes for a more thoughtful, well-rounded populace. You know, people who read, they're interesting, they're thoughtful, they're smart.
That's all I have for my questions. Did you have anything you'd like to add? Any kind of stories you wanted to pull out? Any avenues of thought that you wanted to, explore?
Well, I think one of the reasons I did this book, Hometown Pasadena, well, it really is kind of the core reason, is my husband and I moved here 27 years ago with a 2-year-old child and another on the way. And we moved here because with some trepidation on my part. I grew up in LA. I had a notion that Pasadena was sort of stuffy and staid and boring. But, we were able to get a nice house with a nice yard for kids and, nice place to raise a family compared to where we were living before. So I had this bias about it. And then over the next few years, just fell in love with it. It was much more diverse than I realized. There was a very wide range of people, interests, the history, the art, the culture. I just did not understand how much was here. So as that process, I really just fell in love with it, and that's where the idea for the book came from, was that I thought even a lot of people in Los Angeles, right next door, don't know. Excellent.
Thank you so much again, and thanks for
Thank
having me
you.
over.
Of course.
It was very
I
cool.
appreciate it. It's obviously, who doesn't want